In your career as a social scientist, what's the most memorable moment you can remember where you learned something that was completely contrary to how you expected it to behave? I come from physics, and I find that there are a few things like that whenever you start to apply rigorous mathematical modeling to various systems. When I saw this question, I immediately knew what my answer would be. Because it dictated my life for about 8 years, it demonstrates the utility of what my actually a professor, actually a game theorist alter ego does. It connects to one of the ongoing world crises, and it foreshadowed where I am physically today. And just to set some ground rules on what I picked here, I am avoiding cases where I changed my mind about what was happening in the world. That happens every day. Heck, one of the main themes from my video archive is that we, as keyboard warriors, do not get to know much about what is really happening out there. So, I think regime change in Iran is less likely than I did 2 months ago, is about the coldest take that I could give you. Instead, I wanted to focus on something that fundamentally changed the way I think about geopolitics. Phrasing it like that, I suppose that I can make reading rationalist explanations for war as an oblivious 20-year-old as my choice for runner-up. That is the article that launched crisis bargaining theory as a field and established the idea that the costs of war, in principle, guarantee a range of mutually preferable peace deals. This was the era when lines on maps were hash marks on a unidimensional bargaining space. Doesn't quite have the same ring to it. It would also be cool to hop in a time machine and tell that past version of me that 8 years later, he would become James Fearon's postdoc. Maybe one day I will get him on the podcast and we can describe how that paper got developed in the first place. And as I'm saying that, I realize that I need to specify I'm talking about Fearon on the podcast, not the 20-year-old version of me that would require a time machine to be able to talk to. But this question is asking specifically about something contrary to what I suspected. And the whole war is costly, they should negotiate thing is less about something working the opposite of expectations, and more about me not having thought about the question with serious rigor before. Anyway, my actual answer jumps ahead 2 years from then. I was taking a gap year before heading to grad school. Why a gap year, you may ask? Because I was a lazy undergrad before finding crisis bargaining theory. My GPA was terrible, and I needed my full senior year grades to balance everything out and give me some hope of getting into a good school. That year also coincided with Pittsburgh hosting the G20 summit. This was concurrent to some of the initial negotiations between the Obama administration and Iran over the latter's nuclear program. Well, I was the late-night manager at a coffee shop that year. We had a TV usually turned to the news, and I heard Obama make the following public proposal to Iran. Iran must comply with UN Security Council resolutions and make clear it is willing to meet its responsibilities as a member of the community of nations. We have offered Iran a clear path toward greater international integration if it lives up to its obligations, and that offer stands. But the Iranian government must now demonstrate through deeds its peaceful intentions, or be held accountable to international standards and international law. So, basically, we give Iran a bunch of concessions, and Iran does not build nuclear weapons. My immediate thought was that there was no way that this could possibly work. We live in a world with non-binding contracts. Why wouldn't Iran just take those concessions and build some nukes anyway? So I sat down to write a model that would demonstrate this point. The United States makes an offer. Iran can 1. Fight under the current distribution of power, 2. Accept the offer and not build nuclear weapons, or 3. Accept the offer and build nuclear weapons for a particular cost. If Iran tried to build, the United States had the opportunity to stop it with preventive war. Failing to do so, power would shift favorably to Iran, and there would be a new round of negotiations, where a rejected proposal would lead to a war under more favorable circumstances for Iran than beforehand. Now, I expected that one of 3 things would happen, depending on the exact payoffs that the states could obtain. 1. If nuclear weapons were too expensive, the parties would basically ignore building as a possibility, and bargain to avoid war like they would normally do. The deal would be commensurate with the status quo balance of power. 2. If the United States viewed preventive war as rather cheap compared to how much it would alter the balance of power, Iran would realize that trying to proliferate would just be a waste of resources. Like before, they would reach a deal commensurate with the status quo balance of power. And 3. When Iran believed nuclear weapons were worth the investment, but preventive war was too expensive for the United States, Iran would inevitably proliferate. The United States would realize that Iran could just take any concessions it receives and build anyway, so it was a fool's errand to even try. Essentially, what Obama was doing was a silly mistake. Deriving the conditions where the first two things happen was easy enough. But then something weird happened as I tried deriving the case where a deal fails and Iran acquires nuclear weapons. It just did not work. Iran kept agreeing to the deal. I tossed the model aside for a day to give me some time to think about where I was screwing up the math. But when I came back to it, I realized that the math was not wrong. My initial intuition was. Here is where my line of thinking went off the rails. My belief was that Iran could take any concession that the United States gives it, build anyway, and then successfully extract more out of the United States once it could threaten to use nuclear weapons. In practice, there are only so many concessions that you can get with nuclear weapons. The post-proliferation bargaining problem simply ends with an agreement commensurate with Iran's newfound power. Consequently, by building nuclear weapons, Iran does not get the current concessions plus something else in the long run. It just gets whatever that commensurate amount is. Working backward, the United States could simply offer that amount up front. If Iran builds, it still gets that quantity, but pays its cost of nuclear weapons. Thus, the combination of the attractive offer and the cost to build is enough to convince Iran to accept. Moreover, inducing Iran to accept is better for the United States than the alternative, because it does not have to deal with a nuclear Iran. I am glossing over some of the minutiae here, but the basic point is that my initial intuition was completely and 100% wrong. Fortunately for me, the correct answer was more interesting than what I thought the answer was, so that model eventually turned into my master's thesis, my dissertation, and eventually, my first university press book. There was a lot of research to do there to explain why countries build nuclear weapons given the inefficiency puzzle that my 2009-era research first discovered, hence how I could expand on it so much. But that process also directly taught me what any of us who have done this for long enough know all too well. It is way too easy to make a fundamental oversight when working through strategic decision-making, purely in our heads or with verbal arguments. The math provides a sanity check. It is how we know that the assumptions imply the conclusions that we draw. Actually, if you want to learn more about this subject, my main channel has a full course on nuclear proliferation. Check it out. And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Take care.